Welcome back to Oh, and Another Thing. We are back. Today we have the video for you guys. If you listened to us last Friday in our very impassioned news and politics podcast for the weekend to take you in, you knew we did not have a video for you, and the audio was bad. So good news, Giovanna. Come on in, lean on in here if you want. She's coming over. Giovanna, the wonderful, beautiful Giovanna, did her bi-weekly or weekly? It's weekly. I'm trying to think. You do your makeup videos three times a week.
Last week we only did one video, but
so last week
3 times.
Okay, so you did your video last week and you recorded it here, and we found out that the audio on the camera, whenever we're close enough to it, it's not so bad. So we're going to have the video and good audio for you this week. So that is really great news. Really great news. We can bring the quality to you as well as the passion this week. As you can see, I am in what used to be a teen's bedroom. We have some great pictures of what I believe is Syracuse, New York behind me.
It's not. It's Italy.
Are you sure it looks like Syracuse?
It's Italy, but it was from the Syracuse University catalog to try to get you to go to school there and you could study abroad in Italy. I didn't get in, so, just keep them on the wall forever. Gotta get something out of Syracuse.
So we have these great pictures of Syracuse, New York behind us. Anyway, so, again, we have a lot to talk about today, so let's just, some housekeeping, I guess we have to do. If you're listening to the podcast version, please check us out on YouTube. If you're watching YouTube, go check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. Subscribe, follow, leave us comments, all the stuff you would do for a program you really enjoy, do it for us. All right, so, there's a lot going on. Obviously, today is Tuesday. What's the date?
June 9th.
Today is Tuesday, June 9th. Today is the George Floyd's funeral. Something on that real quick. We know it's been a really nice service so far. We've checked in on it. There was, his niece said something about how America was never all that great, which is wonderful from her. It got a lot of applause and wonderful there. But I want to turn our attention to something else on the morning of this. Again, one of the biggest things to happen in our country. I don't want to make it seem like this is just an empty statement here, but this morning the president took to Twitter and he started talking about conspiracy theories about what happened to the 75-year-old man in Buffalo, who we talked about last week, who got shoved to the ground by police, was allowed to bleed out on the sidewalk before help came to him. The president this morning gets on Twitter the day of George Floyd's funeral, and instead of issuing a condolence, any kind of statement to even attempt to unify the country or use this day as a chance to make right on a lot of previous bad statements and hateful words from him and hateful endorsement retweets, but instead of doing any of that and even acknowledging what's going on today and acknowledging the Floyd family, pretty disgusting, I would have to say, because even if, and we know, it's not even an if here, he doesn't care. We know the president doesn't actually care about this. We know he's not even going to feign to care. But it would be nice if he would, even just as a unifying voice in the country, step up today and say, this is happening, my condolences to George Floyd's family, we are with you today. Something as simple as that. just something so simple to do that any president could figure out to do, that any administration could figure out to do. For some reason, they can't even find it in themselves to put up that. Even if it's, I know it's empty, so it doesn't make it right because it's empty. But it's better than spending the whole day ignoring what's happening and focusing on, again, this fake conspiracy he came up with overnight, or he got on OAN. And OAN, regardless, no one cares about them. They're not a worthwhile media outlet, so we're not going to spend too much time on them. He's talked about how the Senate confirmed some more judges today, a new legislation that I don't understand what it does. I know it's supposed to protect homeless people and people who go homeless after the coronavirus. I don't know what he's getting at with it. He's done all of that today without making one mention of George Floyd and his family. And I think that should be mentioned today because it speaks to who he is as a person and who he is as a leader. And moving on from that now, because now we have some real nitty-gritty here that is across the board, has to do with everything, really. And that is what's going on in Georgia today. As many of you know, today is Georgia's primary election. There are, obviously, the primary for Republican president Republican presidential nominee and Democratic presidential nominee. We know who they're going to be, so those aren't really that big. I mean, any message you can send via vote, if you can show up and still vote for Bernie, and Bernie could maybe, like, do well, it'd be good. It's a statement vote, really. So you can go and you can make that vote still if you're able to vote, and that's what we're here to talk about right now, because there's also the nomination going on for the Senate race, and we know Jon Ossoff, who we're polling for, because we know John already came close, and Representative Lewis is going around with him helping to register new voters in Georgia, and I think that's really incredible, and they've already made a big push to get more new people registered to vote and make elections more accessible to a lot of people in Georgia, which is good work to be doing. So we here are backing Jon Ossoff in that primary, if anybody cares about that. But what is worth noting is that this is the first election in Georgia to have this electronic voter system that they put in place after the last election. And we all know what happened during the last election, how Matt Kemp... Was it Matt Kemp? Regardless, Governor Kemp stole that governor seat from Stacey Abrams via multiple forms of election vote suppression, I should say. And what we're seeing is a lot of the same happen right now in Georgia, and I think we need to call attention to it because this is going to be the playbook for the Republican Party going into November. The polling is not great right now, and I don't want to overstate the polling for the president being not that great, because that could be a really easy thing for us to fall into, like a lackadaisical mindset, if you will, where we're starting to think, okay, well, Biden's up 12 points in the polls, and, on a generic ballot, Democrats are up 9 points, so maybe we can take our foot off the gas a little.
Hillary was up in polling at this point in 2016.
And Hillary was up, not up as much. Hillary wasn't up 9 or 10 points in the polling.
But she was still up.
But she was still up.
Exactly.
And I saw a tweet yesterday that said that all the polls don't take cheating into account. Yeah. And we have to remember that, because the polls do not take cheating into account. Because you could argue, and the argument would be pretty good, what's happening in Georgia today does amount to voter suppression. Even if it's not intentional, like the Georgia election, I don't know what to call it, committee, whatever it is, would say, but whenever you look at it, there's a new voting system. There are people in Georgia that are not trained on this voting system. The voting systems are not set up properly. They are running out of requests for absentee ballots on site, and that is dangerous and bad, because as we stated, the polling does not take into account that there will be voter suppression at the polls, especially in black communities, minority communities, poor communities that already have a harder time getting to a polling place, already have a hard time being able to vote or have access to voting. Maybe it takes a long time for them to vote because of how long the lines are. Maybe there's not enough voting machines in their precinct. There are all these different things that go into voter suppression in poor black communities. And what's worth noting is that the largest portion of the problems that we're seeing right now in Georgia with this primary election, again, luckily today is just a primary. This is not the general election, it's just the primary. However, what this does do, these kind of election problems, these kind of voting problems that people are having, it does tamper enthusiasm for them to go out and try to vote again, because they go and they say, oh, well, I wanted to vote in the primary. I was really excited to vote for Jon Ossoff. I was really excited to go cast my vote for him because I believe in him. I get there, the voting machines don't work. I get there and they tell me that it's going to take, there's a repairman who's 20 miles away. We have to wait for him to get here. They don't have time for that. Some of these people have to go work. Some of these people have to go home to their families, to their kids, to take care of things. And if you're in a situation where you are having a harder time voting, your vote is now suppressed. Your vote is no longer able to happen. So by doing that, Republicans who run election committees in these states know that they can essentially steal an election again as long as they put the good voting booths in the right areas and the maybe more malfunctioning, more problematic voting machines in poorer, less white communities. That way, they don't have to hear the voice of the black or the minority communities. Because, get this, they don't give a shit about those communities. The reason they don't care about those communities, because they're racist. There's a lot of reasons to it, but mostly because they are racist. So there is voter suppression actively happening right now. And it's happening, and it's concerning because it is a primary, and it dampens that enthusiasm for November. So now we have people who are standing in lines at 80 to 90 degree temperatures, high humidity, You guys have been in the South. It's not comfortable.
We're also in the middle of a pandemic.
We're in the middle of a
People are still
pandemic.
trying to social distance.
People are trying to social distance, as Giovanna just said. So these things that are happening in Georgia are the blueprint for the Republican Party this November, because as we stated to start at the top of this, things aren't looking good right now for Republicans, and that is their own fault. They have no one to blame for it but themselves. They spent the last 4 years placating and, selling out any moral high ground they ever had so that they could have this idiot in charge of everything, so they could have this, I don't even know what to call him anymore. He's just not good. He's just big baby president boy. And they've done everything they can for the past 4 years to insulate him. Past 4 years to say, oh no, what you're doing is fine, Mr. President. We need you, Mr. President, they kept saying. So any repercussions they feel at the polls, it's on them. They've made their choices. They've passed their bad legislation. They have allowed for a president to keep being president after he tried to do a slew of terrible things in the first 3 years. And then we got to impeachment, and he did what he did in Ukraine, weaponizing the United States Department of Justice as a way to create these illegal back channels and influence the way foreign policy was done, but in a really unsavory way. It feels like Ukraine was so long ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Feels like it was a lifetime ago, but if we need a refresher on it, do not forget that the president said that he would only help Ukraine in their fight against Russia if they would help him dig up dirt or manufacture dirt on Joe Biden, his political rival, who he knew he would end up running against somehow. And now look, he's running against them, and it didn't help. However, he already went. He sought that dirt, he used that quid pro quo, and he and he abused his power. After that abuse of power, after that clear violation of laws to give us free and fair elections, which seems to be what Republicans are going to do, they allowed it to happen. They said, this isn't a problem, this is presidential, this is what they do. They allowed it to happen. So this is on Republicans, and they know that the only way they can win is to dampen excitement, is to make people feel like their voice doesn't matter if it's heard or not, as if their vote doesn't count for as much, as if there's no reason for them to go because more people will go, and if they go, there's not even a chance that they will vote because who knows if the machines will work. There are all kinds of things, and this is a multi-pronged problem in this country, because voter suppression, as we've talked about on here before, is the only way Republicans hold on to power. As we've mentioned, there's less registered Republicans today than independents, than independents. There's more Democrats, more independents, and then you have Republicans. They are losing out. They are losing out on their voter base. Their voter base is dying. They are not replacing those voters because of what the party is now, and I don't blame people for not wanting to be Republicans because of what the party is now. This is a multifaceted problem, and we're seeing them put it into place and test different things out in Georgia. Like I said, these machines get tested. It's not like they take these machines out of the box, put them on the ground, and say, all right, good machines. No, they test them all first. So they know which machines are good machines and which machines are a little bit faulty. Does it seem like any kind of coincidence that any time there's voter problems or machines break down in states like Georgia, in southern states, that it happens in places like Atlanta that have large black communities, places that are, less white, just straight up less white? It takes away the access to voting to all of Americans, and that is the Republican Party's goal and what their plan is for November, because they know they cannot beat Democratic candidates on the issues, because the issues that people care about right now are healthcare, education, making it more affordable, raising the minimum wage, making sure people have more money so we can have a more healthy and happy society, term limits. There's some other Democratic things right now that everybody's talking about.
What everybody's talking about right now? Racial equality?
Racial equality. Anything. Any issue, defunding the police, anything. Any issue you can think of that Democrats support and Republicans object, the popular side of that is the Democratic side of it. Any issue. We're better on healthcare. We are better on trade. We are better on, again, education reform, police reform, community reform, all of it. And they know that they can't keep up. So their best bet is to cheat. And that is what they want to do. So that's why we can't get too excited whenever we see Biden up 12 points in a poll, or we see the generic Dems up 10 points in a poll. Because again, that doesn't account for the fact that they're going to do everything they can to keep a lot of those people who are now jumping off the Trump train from voting. And it's a shame that it's happening, because it is not what America is supposed to be. None of what's happening is what America is supposed to be. But here we are. It's not great, but here we are. And it's just, it points to everything that we've already been talking about for the past 2 weeks, and that, I mean, black people have been talking about for forever. The inequalities in the system. Again, there's a reason these machines go to poor black communities whenever they don't work as well. Because they don't care as much what those people have to say. They don't care. They don't want that vote counted, because they know that vote likely will go against them. And that's not democracy, that's not freedom, and that's not how elections should work or do work, really.
Can I say something?
Hop on in.
Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh, what's her name, just
Kayleigh
came
McEnany.
out and told everybody, bragged to everybody, that he has 8% of the black vote.
8% of the black vote. That's what and he said that to oppose, because Mitt Romney only got 2% of the black vote also, which is not great. But worth noting also, since 1964, no Democratic candidate has won the white vote. Did you know that?
Really?
Yeah, since 1964.
White vote or black vote?
White vote.
The black vote.
The white vote. We're talking about the black vote, but I wanted to bring that up because it also speaks about
how the Republicans will always get the white vote.
How the Republicans will get the white vote, because that's who they want.
53% of white women voted for Donald Trump.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Kind of off topic here, but the press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, her husband is Sean Gilmartin, a former New York Met relief pitcher, who was okay, but one of my favorite memories, since I know he's married to a dirtbag, is whenever I went to a Phillies game, and I think it was like 2013, 2012, I went down to Philly for this game. Phillies suck, go Mets, first off. Mets are down like 13-0 in this game. 7th inning comes around. David Wright hits a home run. The comeback begins. The Mets come back from I think 13 runs down again, and they tie the game. We go to the next inning. Here comes Sean Gilmartin, husband of Kayleigh McEnany, the garbage bag who they put in front to talk to the press every day. Comes in, blows the game. Gives up 5 runs, game over. I have to leave with my head down, because I was talking so much shit afterward because I thought the Phillies were going to blow this game, but then Sean Gilmartin effed me. So Sean Gilmartin and Kayleigh McEnany, I don't like either of you.
Very important point.
Very important point to make, but that's what we're here for. Anyway.
This is a news and politics podcast with sprinkles of sports.
Sprinkles of sports. That's what I always wanted it to be, was little sprinkles and snippets of sports. And maybe while we're talking about that, we can talk about the ongoing labor negotiations with Major League Baseball. Looks like we're not going to have baseball. I just want to mention that right now, because it really speaks to the rest of society right now, which is why we're bringing it up. The billionaire owners, in the middle of a pandemic, are trying to squeeze every penny they still can out of Major League Baseball, and they're doing it at the expense of the players who are the worker in this situation. I know you're hearing this, you're saying, "Oh, Vince, but they make millions of dollars. They make hundreds of millions of dollars. Some of them."
I don't think anyone is doing
Well, if they are,
I feel seen.
they should feel seen now. Anyway, that being said, these are still players. These are still the people who make the owners their money. These are the people who still do the work for the owners. You know what owning a baseball team requires? Just sit down and let the team play. Just sit down and let the GM handle it. You're just the money, my man. There's nothing to being an owner in baseball that should give you a right to do this, to hold people's livelihoods like this, because then these players don't play. There's a chance they don't get paid for this season. And those are people without money, and it speaks a lot because of how bad minor league baseball is right now. Bernie Sanders talked about this during his campaign. He was big vocal supporter of minor league baseball, because minor league baseball, in a lot of, again, small, poor communities, provide a lot of jobs to those small, poor communities. You have stadium vendors, you have stadium ushers, you have people who take care of the stadium, maintain the stadium, trainers, athletic people, attendants, money going in, vendors. It's big for these small communities. I can't even think of what to do in the town of Altoona, Pennsylvania, without minor league baseball. What do you do in Altoona if you can't go to a curve game? Go to Del Grosso amusement park? I'm not going to a water park to get water dumped on me during a pandemic. Come on. Like, all the power to Del Grosso, they make a hell of a spaghetti sauce, but I don't want water on me in a pandemic, that's all. Anyway, so this is a problem that we're having, and it's not just in one place, it's across the board. These owners, these billionaires, don't care about workers, they don't care about the health of the public, they care about their bottom line. The players offered to play more baseball. The players offered to play a 100-game season. But the owners said, nah, we want a really short season. We want it to really be like a month, and then we'll do an expanded playoff, and you guys can only get 33% of your earnings for the year. Does that sound fair? Does that sound fair to tell somebody that they're only going to make 33% of their salary for the year because of a totally uncontrollable thing?
Can they collect unemployment if they're not paid? Or are they still getting partial salary right
See, I'm not sure. I don't know if the player, like the guys in the show, so to speak, can. But as far as I know, some minor leaguers, I think minor leaguers can. I'm not sure. But either way, these minor leaguers, the players, and this is who I also feel a lot for. Because, again, the impact on the communities is terrible. Again, there's places that don't have their full tourist attractions. They don't have the full income for their communities right now because minor league baseball can't happen this year.
Oh, they're also getting rid of a bunch of
And they're getting rid of a lot of teams. They're cutting teams out completely. So there's teams that, may have just started, or communities that are used to having a ball club there in the summer, that they rely on that income for their communities. Not going to be there next year either.
Pawtucket, Rhode Island. There is really not a lot to do in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. It is a very poor area of Rhode Island, and they just cut the Paw Sox. They're moving it to Worcester, where there's already a ton of industry in Worcester.
This is what's
That'll
happening.
Be great for Worcester, but they didn't really need it.
They didn't really need it. Good for Worcester. Shout out to Worcester. We love Worcester. They have that great hot dog spot your dad's always talking about, but they may not have needed a team. They may not have needed a team, so they're starting to impact these poor communities that did rely on the income from these teams to help their communities. And then we speak of what's happening to the players. And I know this isn't the biggest deal this week, and we'll talk about why protests matter here after this. But these are guys whose careers are done for now. A lot of these players, this was their chance. This season could have been it for a lot of these players, a lot of these minor league players, who maybe they went to school for something that they just figured, I'll make it to Major League Baseball. I'll be fine. I don't need to use my degree for it. A lot of them, what are they going to do now? They have no income. They didn't make that much money anyway in the minor leagues. They only made, some of them, $1,500 for a month. Imagine living off that. And then having to travel place to place, share rooms with your teammates. It's not an easy lifestyle for these minor leaguers who now, what do? What do you do if you're a minor league baseball player with nowhere to play? With no prospect of moving up? Your dream, your lifelong childhood dream, is out the window, and there's no chance of it coming back right now because the owners are being greedy and not allowing for any kind of true good faith negotiation with players. And it speaks to the mindset in this country of the rich control it all. And for some reason that's okay with so many people. But before we talk any more about that, let's talk about the great from this week, the nice things from this week, because as we've said, there's been a lot of garbage between the president being terrible, between, for some reason, us having to have full-on arguments with friends and family members, just asking to say, hey, treat black people equally. Like, we're getting into these long, heated, winded debates with people over just common sense things, civil rights issues, and people keep saying, well, it's just politics. This is politics. You're very passionate about the politics of this. I can't talk to you whenever you're talking politics like this. This isn't politics, remember. What we've been experiencing for the past 2 weeks since George Floyd's murder is not politics. It's far from that. It's civil rights. What happened was the police treated a man as less than he was because he was black. They would not have done that to a white man. They would not have done it. They would not have allowed it. The officers would have stopped them. But because he was who he was, his life mattered less to those officers. His life mattered less to those officers. From there, the protests began. What is our First Amendment right in this country? To voice our opinions freely. I'm not gonna quote the whole First Amendment, but it's to voice our opinions freely without the infringement of the federal government or any government forces at all. But what did the government do to the protesters who were peacefully protesting George Floyd's murder? Sent in the National Guard, encouraged police forces to use military-style violence to suppress the protesters, We saw what they did at Lafayette Square, so President Trump could take that stupid fucking photo that he had no idea how to do. These are real issues in the country, and these aren't just political issues. Our rights under the First Amendment, that's not politics. That's your rights as an American. That is not something we can agree and disagree on. That is not how it works. That's not what the founders intended. It is not, should Americans have a First Amendment right. It's Americans have a First Amendment right. That's one of the things my mom's a very patriotic woman. Shout out to Sue Patron. I love you very much. One of the things my mom would say to me growing up was that I was lucky to live in this country. That no other country was like this. And it wasn't until later on that I found out there were a lot of other free countries that were kind of just like us, if not a little bit better. However, there was that pride in me that said that there are not countries that offer this kind of freedom of speech and things like that. And it's true, there are countries, lots of countries, that do not have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of all this stuff. And it is one of the things that makes America unique in a way. It makes us, it gives us a chance to be who we are, to speak out and live in a free democracy. But that was attacked directly by the government this week. And even people in the media, people just sitting at home, when you say to them, hey, this isn't right, what's happening in the streets, they shouldn't be hurting these protesters, shooting rubber bullets at these protesters. They say, yeah, but. And this isn't a yeah, but situation. Even so much, I'm going to talk about it real quick. The editor of my local paper, the newspaper that I used to deliver as a boy, what got me into news, I was paper boy of the month in October 2005 or 2007, I believe.
Brag.
Yeah, well, sorry about the brag there. So, delivered all 36 of my papers that month. Couldn't stop me. Anyway, so I had a very small paper out for the Du Bois Courier Express whenever I was a young boy. I delivered that paper, and I loved that paper, but it was brought to my attention this week that the editor, David Sullins, the current editor at the Courier Express, as of right now, as far as we know, got onto a Facebook Live, and he found some videos of peaceful protests happening in Houston, and he thought it was right to comment over an image, and I want to say this right now, it was over an image of peaceful protesters. There was nothing violent happening in the image that David Sullins commented on. It was a live stream, thank you. It was a live stream of peaceful protesters speaking to a police officer in a face mask, without riot gear. A normal police officer, the way we want to see them. Not decked like they're going into Fallujah, not decked out like they're ready to storm Normandy. Regular police clothing. So, this cop is surrounded by peaceful protesters, speaking to him, just talking. The closest thing these protesters have to a weapon is a couple of signs and a karaoke microphone. However, David Sullins takes the opportunity to say, seems like a great chance to eliminate the entire bunch. Now, I'll post the image. I think I can put the image right here in the video. If not, you can check it out on my Twitter. I've posted it there also, at Vince_Patron, Yukon Carnitas, a tool for the left. In that image, there is no violence. There is no looting, no weapons, no broken glass, no bricks, no anything.
And would I be remiss to mention it wouldn't matter even if there was?
And thank you. And it wouldn't matter if there was. It's a good excuse to eliminate the whole bunch. Now, after calls to action all week from concerned people like me and Haley Roth, shout out to Haley, who's been really helpful in all this, helping and spearheaded a lot of the activism that's been happening around this situation. There's been petitions started, obviously Facebook posts made, calls to senators, congressmen, representatives. We've been working on Twitter tirelessly to get celebrities to share our petition to get David Sullins fired. But all they've done at the Courier Express, pretty wild, look at that. But all they've done at the Courier Express, I don't know. All they've done at the Courier Express is offer two apologies. One from the publisher, Pat Patterson, where he said essentially that he's sorry that we got offended. He condemned David's statement to eliminate the whole bunch of protesters, but nothing more. An empty apology, an empty condemnation of, again, racist, hateful, anti-democratic rhetoric coming out of his newsroom. And
yeah,
we're all outraged. Clearly, Bertram is here, and Bertram is outraged. Wait, you want to say hello? Go ahead, say hello.
Can you see him?
Yeah. Anyway.
Thank you, Barry.
Thank you, Bertram. You got his 2 cents in.
Yeah.
But again, an empty condemnation from the person who is the highest ranking official in this paper. Essentially saying, though I don't agree with David, I don't think he was wrong, so I'm not going to fire him. So David Sullins is still working there. He's issued his own apology.
Which was also bad.
Which was also no good. I think, did I cover Pat's apology properly? Did I say everything I had to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, David's apology also basically said, I'm sorry you got offended, that's not what it meant. And he also refused to reiterate what he said.
Yes.
So people that are not on Facebook, aka a lot of older people who read that paper, are not even going to know what he's talking about.
Not even going to know what he's talking about. And what he said was patently wrong. So Pat Patterson's apology says he's not going to do anything. He has no plans to fire David Sullins, at least if his apology is to be taken at its word, because it appears, again, he didn't say that David was going to be let go, that David was going to be allowed to finish out the week at the Courier, and then he would be fired or forced to resign, any of that. So, without action, there is no real condemnation of the things that David said, because, again, what David said, there is no place for it in journalism. There is no place for it in America, let alone. Again, David has a job as editor of a local newspaper, that he really is one of the final voices, one of the leading voices in a region. A lot of people get their news, and only get their news, in small towns from their small local paper, especially older folks. Older folks wait around all day for this newspaper to come so they can get their news. I know that because I had more than my fair share of unhappy phone calls from people in my time as a paper boy who had to wait past 4 o'clock to get a newspaper. And I know 4 o'clock is kind of late in the day to get news, so I understand their complaints now that I am also an ornery old man. So I understand these people do care greatly about the news, but that's why it makes it even more concerning that David made these comments and has been allowed to stick around in his post, because it is an open endorsement of that kind of rhetoric, that kind of anti-democratic, racist, biased, bigoted language. Then we get David's personal apology, where he says that he didn't mean for us to see that. He was just commenting on a Houston page. He was commenting about Houston, and the comment made its way up from Texas, and that doesn't make it right. That doesn't make any of it any better. That just means you didn't think we'd see it. That means you didn't think that your readers, the people, the good folks of Du Bois, Pennsylvania, that you thought they wouldn't see it. And if they did see it, that they wouldn't care. What David is sorry about is that we ended up seeing his hate. That's what he's upset about. He's not sorry that he has that hate in him. He has no plans of looking inward at that hate and fixing it. What he is most sorry about is that we found out. Is that story came up from Texas and found its way into our homes. That's what he's upset about. That's what he's sorry about. He then goes on to talk about how he wasn't speaking of the peaceful protesters, and this is why it's important to remember what the image he commented on was. It wasn't about the peaceful protesters, he says. He believes that people should protest peacefully. That's what he believes in so staunchly. However, he says that he was speaking of the violent protesters, the looters. In the image that David commented on, the one with the black police officer and the Black Lives Matter protesters all around peacefully chit-chatting and talking, and hopefully talking about the issues, closest thing to a weapon being a microphone. There's not a looter in that picture. There's no violence in that picture. Unless you look at the people in that picture and automatically assume violence. And if you look at the people in that picture, black people, and automatically assume violence, you, my friend, are a racist. You, my friend, are a bigot. You, my friend, the Du Bois Courier-Express, are employing him at the highest position in news. People fight to become editors. People work their ass off their entire lives to become editors so they can have that kind of voice, that kind of control over a newsroom of a paper. And this is who you have in charge. And despite calls for a week to the paper, despite calls and emails and tweets, everything, Facebook comments, all of it, they sit on their hands and do nothing at the Courier Express. And it's so disappointing because of what the Courier Express should be and could be and used to be. Whenever Denny Bonavita was in charge of that paper, shout out to Denny Bonavita. Nobody listening to this, if this is on a national platform stage, gives a shit about what I'm about to say about Denny Bonavita. But Denny Bonavita did a hell of a job with the Courier Express and made sure that it was a fair and unbiased paper. Since David Sullins has taken over that paper, they publish Ben Shapiro op-eds in it. Is Ben Shapiro what you would consider unbiased? And I know the op-ed section is a good place to put more of an opinion. It's the opinion editorial section. I get that. But I don't think the good people of Du Bois, PA should be getting their thoughts given to them by Ben Shapiro. That's just me. I mean, that's just me. There is a problem with that. So, we're hoping by the end of today, after again making phone calls to Representative Matt Gabler, Senator Joe Scarnati, we went with Republican lawmakers because that's who controls the region, really. Reached out to advertisers. We've reached out to subscribers. We've got a petition going with close to 1,000 signatures already, and it's really encouraging. That fact is really encouraging. I said it in a really weird way, and I apologize. The good people of Du Bois, PA have really shocked me this week. I'm pleasantly surprised to see that we were able to unite and come together in such a way that there is actually movement, I think, right now. I have no idea if anything has changed at the paper. But they're listening. Again, close to 1,000 people have signed this petition to fire this editor over racist comments he made. If you'd have said that would have happened in Du Bois, Pennsylvania to me, even 2 years ago, I'd have said, you're crazy. But it's happening now. And that's really encouraging. And I want to talk about why it's encouraging and why protests matter. Because protests, they have said to us all week long that we can do what we want, we can work as hard as we want, but the protests, what do they change? Do protests actually work? Do people going out and vandalizing and causing commotions in the streets actually work? And yes, it does. I'm going to rattle off a list of things here that have changed since these protests have started. And granted, there's still a long way to go. These are just the beginning steps, and we're asking for more. We're asking for, before I go any further, let me put that out there, what we want to see. People are talking about defunding the police. And defunding the police is the right term for it, because that is what we want to do. We want to take away funding from police forces. That way they cannot weaponize themselves. That way they cannot grossly overpay overtime. That way they cannot abuse their power and get away with it. That way they do not have flashbangs, rubber bullets, automatic weapons, all these just military-grade weapons that they for some reason have in these police forces. Leave them with just a taser and a couple of guns. They can take care of themselves. But when we say defund the police, we don't really mean, like, get rid of cops, because we know that's not going to happen. Obviously, we're realists.
I mean, yeah, we do.
Come on, we're not going to...
come on and help?
Yeah, get over here.
Okay.
Because I don't think we're ever going to get rid of cops. I want that to be known right now. We're not getting rid of cops. But what we want to do is reimagine how cops do their jobs.
We're not talking about abolishing laws. Nobody wants to live in a lawless society.
Nobody wants to live in a lawless society. Well,
we want to live in a society that people are, we do want, I don't like the word law enforcement because it just like immediately implies cops to me, but of course we want people that are making sure that people are following the laws and everything, but the system as it is right now needs to completely change. It's a systemic racism built into the current way the police force is, and it needs to completely change. We need to reallocate funding back into black communities and back into education. So as you said, they don't need the money to be spending on these military grade weapons. It's just not necessary.
Why does a police department have a tank?
There's no need for it. Also, the complaint is now that police officers are expected to do 1,000 jobs. They're expected to be social workers, as well as being security, as well as being traffic enforcers. Like, there's just so many things that is expected to them. It's inevitable that they are going to fail. And at a certain point, it's not their fault. That's why so many good cops end up becoming bad cops, because the system is broken. The system is so messed up, it's impossible for them to succeed.
And we were talking the other day about how police unions make it impossible for these officers to speak up because of fear of their job security. Why would if a cop at an entry level isn't making a ton of money, Why would a cop speak up and possibly lose their job whenever they know they have to hang around for 10 years to get that pension they signed up for? Why would you hold anyone accountable if you have to be in that department for 10 years? That doesn't make sense.
People lose their jobs from speaking up. We've seen so many examples of people that spoke up about the system being broken and were just fired.
Just fired?
That's why the system needs to change. It's not a few bad apples. It's not just needing to get rid of those bad apples. It's needing to change the whole thing and put in place a more categorical way of doing things.
Like we saw, the article from CNN today talked about Camden, New Jersey, where they went through 7 years ago and they reimagined how they do their policing. Now, on the first day of a cop's job in Camden, New Jersey, they have to go door to door introducing themselves. They have to go into homes, say, I am here, I am going to protect, and I'm going to serve you. And then they're held to that standard. It's reforms like that. That's just a small thing that they can do. That kind of community policing. What we are talking about is redirecting money from police departments into education, redirecting it into public health care, into higher wages, into better working conditions, into just better lives for people in these communities. Because it's shown that whenever you do that, whenever you put more money into communities to fix the communities, you don't need to over-police the communities how you do. Which is what the problem is.
Crime goes down when police forces go down. The NYPD went on strike, I don't know how many years ago, but they went on strike and crime dropped.
50%.
Should tell you everything you need to know.
And that's not just because, well, it is because crimes weren't being reported, but it's because crimes that don't matter weren't being reported. And it's because people felt safer. Things were better. A society without weaponized police is better. So some of the things that have changed already since these protests have started. Minneapolis, within 10 days, have banned the use of chokeholds. And I know that's a small thing because chokeholds are what killed Eric Garner still. And chokeholds are still used by police nationwide. And so much so that Minneapolis has even declared that they will, after a vote by their city council, disband their police force. A major city is going to get rid of their police force because these protests work. That's what we're asking for. We're asking for these police forces to be disbanded and rebuilt from the ground up to be a better policing system.
They're going to have community-led public safety, so that's not to say there will be no public safety. That's not to say there will be nobody enforcing the laws, but it's going to be completely different than the way it was before.
And that's what we're asking for, and that's what protests do. Charges were upgraded on Officer, I'm reading off a list here, that's why I'm looking at my phone. Charges were upgraded against Officer Chauvin and his accomplices, and arrested and charged. It went from a 3rd-degree charge to a 2nd-degree charge, and we organized enough to make sure it didn't get to a 1st-degree charge. That way we could at least get him to go to jail still, because if it went to 1st degree, we weren't going to get him. So the organization on this, beautiful. Great work, folks. Dallas adopts a duty of intervention role that requires officers stop other cops who are engaging in inappropriate use of force. Do you know how big that is? What we've been screaming, what creates bad cops and makes people see all cops as bad or all cops as bastards or whatever the right term is because it's always you see one cop beating up on someone, there's 4 more watching. You see 2 cops beating up on someone, there's 3 more on the way to finish off the work. And it's not funny, but the way they think about it kind of is. So that's a big thing that Dallas is doing, to say that you have to intervene, and if you don't intervene, you are just as guilty as the officer committing the crime, because that is true, because that is the point of this. New Jersey's Attorney General said the state will update its use of force guidelines for the first time in 2 decades. They haven't looked at how they do their policing statewide in New Jersey in 2 decades. 1990.
Can I say something else about New Jersey
Hop
real
in.
quick? Also, Newark, I don't think it's all of New Jersey, but Newark is finally registering the KKK and all white supremacist groups as terrorist groups. Isn't it insane that the KKK wasn't registered as a terrorist group before?
Antifa is.
Antifa is, though. CEOs of Antifa.
CEOs, right? Chief financial officer over here. Her and George Soros got the pocketbook, if anybody's wondering. Japes.
I'm sure you've already talked about Antifa a bunch on here.
Not today. Last week we talked about it, but actually I have a...
Do you want to be a fascist, or do you want to be an anti-fascist? Because if you want to be an anti-fascist, congratulations. Welcome to Antifa.
You know who else was anti-fascist?
Who?
Eisenhower.
Oh. Or it's anti-fascist.
You know who also was anti-fascist? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. You know who also anti-fascist? Franklin Delano Romanowski. Exactly. Anyway, so in Maryland, a bipartisan work group of state lawmakers announced police reform work groups. That's a start there. The LA City Council has introduced a motion to reduce LAPD's $1.8 billion operating budget. Oh, reduce it to $1.8 billion. I think they had like a $9 billion budget to work with or something at the start. MBTA in Boston agrees to stop using public buses to transport police officers to protest. Police brutality captured on cameras leads to near immediate suspensions and firings of officers in cities. Buffalo and Fort Lauderdale. We saw those two cops who, again, for no reason, pushed that poor old man to the ground, cracked his head open, and made him bleed from his ear. They got fired. They got charged. Granted, those other cops showed up to the courthouse to give them a fucking hero's welcome when they got out, which is another reason why all cops are bad. Anyway, and then monuments, this is the other big one. I love this. Confederate monuments are starting to come down. And I love that because you know what is so incredible about the South and about people who celebrate the Confederacy. They forget that they're celebrating not only a losing effort, but an effort that was so undemocratic, so unpatriotic, that they had to leave the United States to pursue it. And then they want to say that's our history. Let me tell you something. Germany doesn't celebrate Nazi Germany day in and day out. So the United States shouldn't celebrate the Confederacy day in and day out because, again, remember, Confederate history is not U.S. history, and that history of the Confederacy is a racist history. The only reason the Confederacy existed was because they wanted to have slaves, and the United States government said they couldn't have slaves. They tried to sell it as a states' rights issue. It was states' rights and slavery. But let me tell you why that's false, and I say it week in and week out on this show almost, because it's a false equivalency, and it's not true. The only state right that the South disagreed with, the only thing they didn't want the U.S. government coming in and saying they couldn't do, was own slaves. That's why the Civil War happened. No other reason. These protests are getting statues torn down from that racist history. They're taking the Robert E. Lee statue down in Virginia. Bob Lee is literally the face of the Confederacy. When you hear about the Confederacy, you hear about Robert E. Lee. They had the Dukes of Hazzard. They drove the General Lee. This is white culture being taken down. And white culture, for a good portion of our time...
White supremacist culture.
Thank you. White supremacist culture being taken down. That's what we're asking for. We are asking for white supremacy to be taken down. And it's in our institutions. It's in our parks. It's in our monuments. I didn't know this, but the Robert E. Lee statue is 6 stories tall. That's bigger than our New York City apartment. We're only a 4-story building. That thing's taller than our apartment. Imagine. Imagine losing a war. Imagine losing a war that you wanted to fight because you wanted to own slaves and be racist without anybody telling you you're being racist, and then building a monument to commemorate it. Crazy. Crazy backward stuff. And this is why protests work, because clearly things are changing that we needed to have change in this country. Like these monuments. Like this history being celebrated. Things are changing and these protests are working. That's why you always hear people ask, and every time I've turned on the news, they ask, do you think this time's going to be different? Do you think these protests are going to... Do you think these protests are going to change things? And I think this is the ones to do it. There are enough people right now coming together. Again, shocked to see the good people of Du Bois, Pennsylvania come together this week and fight to get this racist taken out of the public newspaper. It's happening everywhere. And that wouldn't have happened 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I saw a polling that showed a 30-point swing in public opinion over these protests toward the protest from Eric Garner. 30-point swing, that's big. The ground is changing in America, and we are moving it. And we're the people doing it. The people out in the streets, people protesting, the actual working class Americans of this society, the people of our generation. We're coming together and we're making this happen, and we should be proud of that. Definitely be proud of that, because there is change coming down the pike because of all the work everybody's doing this week. They always talk about on a lot of the podcasts I listen to, they're always talking on Crooked Media especially, about how important organizing is, how important coming together as a collective voice and collective action can be. And one of my fears for November was that we wouldn't be able to come together enough, that the Democratic Party would be splintered, that America would be splintered, that that unity wouldn't be achievable. Unity needed to take down this president and the Republicans that protected him. This week has shown me that that fear was misguided. We've done such a good job organizing and coming together for this. We can do this for anything. We can get any of the change we want to get as long as we keep doing it like this. They said protests won't work, violence won't work, but let me tell you, pointed violence did work a little bit. These protests did work a lot of bit. Things are changing, and it's changing because we're putting the work in, and we should all be really proud of that. Everybody should be. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. This was a great episode of Oh, and Another Thing. We were really positive. We had a really fun time, I think. Again, thank you for listening. We'll be back on Friday with more Oh, right? I'll be back on Friday, right?
Yeah.
I'll be back on Friday with more Oh, and Another Thing. Friday or Saturday, depending on how things go here. We hope to have you back with us then. Thank you for tuning in. I hope this was as much fun for you as it was for me today. Thank you for listening. Keep on fighting. Keep your foot on the gas. We can do this. We can get the change if we keep going. All right. Have a good week.